Hey, hello, Kriti. Thank you so much for joining the Internal Communication Thought Leadership series, which I run on my blog, Introscope. I've got about 30 thought leaders who have spoken so far, and it's great to have you on the show. So, the objective is really to help viewers and readers understand what are the nuances of internal communication, why it's such an important domain, what are some of the best practices, what are the challenges, opportunities which communicators face. So before we start, it'd be great if you could quickly introduce yourself to the viewers.
Sure, it's my pleasure, absolutely, Anisu. And I've been following your blog, so I've been literally stalking you. Um, and what I've got to know, and I love to learn. And I think as communication professionals or any professional, I think it's important to have an ongoing learning
Right.
attitude. And I've learned so much from your blog. Really, it's like a Bible for me for internal communication professionals. Having said that, allow me to introduce myself. I'm Kriti, and I've been working in internal communication space for more than a decade, actually, to be precise, 16, 17 years. And along with that, I have also handled external communications for organizations. Um, and I've also been part of brand and communications team.
Okay.
Um, Over the years, I have worked in industries which have essentially from the IT industry to NASCOM Foundation, which is an association of IT industries.
Right.
And
Right.
NASCOM Foundation was the CSR arm. And then I moved to a manufacturing industry and now with the Times Group.
Right.
So that's been my journey. And I think over the years, I have been able to gain knowledge, not just from my team, from my peers, from my leadership. I think,
Right.
and I've kind of become like an aggregator for uh, internal communications and communications, so to say.
Fantastic. Thank you for that introduction. So, if I noticed your profile, you also worked on some very interesting large-scale projects like at JSW. You kind of worked on the corporate intranet. Right now, you're with the Bennett Coleman organization. So, if you could define what does internal communication mean to you? How does it, what is your understanding of it?
Very interesting conversation. And internal communication for me is not about telling employees what to think, but I think
Hmm.
it's more about enabling honest conversations, not just between them, as in the
Got
employees,
it.
but between the organization and the employees. And I think it has to be consistent and it has to be on an ongoing basis. But the key word is honest conversations. I think,
Right.
and bringing in a sense of trust between them, between the organization and them,
Right.
and do it with ultimate transparency.
Got it. Got it. So that interesting points you called out. So trust, and you talked about, transparent, open communication. So if I were to ask you to, if you could talk about how does it get practiced in your organization or in the previous organizations you worked for? So how does internal communication translate into work on the ground?
See, um, it's not that easy, you know. Uh,
Yeah.
I think it is a process. It is a journey, and you
Right.
start with that journey with involving and engaging employees.
Got
You
it.
cannot have a one-way traffic. You cannot
Right.
say that the organization wants to communicate something but doesn't want to listen. It
Got it.
has to be a two-way traffic. And I'll give you an example. I think if I don't just look at my organizations, but I look at what is happening around the world today,
Right.
especially with COVID and a lot of people, kind of moving out of jobs, etc. I think Airbnb is the best example in terms of the kind of communication they have done, the kind of
Right.
trust they have built, the kind of
Right.
employee advocacy
Right.
one can see, the right examples. It's unbelievable. And I think
Mm.
that, for me, uh, is actual internal communication, because it's not just, your employees are actually becoming your employee advocates. They're talking
Mm.
about it. They are saying, I
Right.
believe in my leadership. There is a
Right.
lot of empathy involved. And at the same time, you're listening. You're
Yeah.
listening, and your conversations, your actions are actually showcasing what
Mm.
you believe in and what has been your culture
Got it.
and what have been your values. So I think
Fantastic.
that is
Right.
extremely important in an internal communications journey.
Fantastic. If you could give me one example, one campaign, one initiative that you worked on personally, which you are proud of, It could be in your current organization, previous organization, anything that you could share where, what is the challenge, what the opportunity,
So Anishu, it's like asking a parent, choose which child is your favorite child. But I will, uh, which child is your favorite child? And I will try and answer that.
Yeah.
So the latest being the conversation that we initiated. So everybody is aware of COVID, the pandemic, global pandemic, how it's just taken over. Everything has come to a halt. People are scared, and not just about their jobs, but their health, the wellness and safety and well-being of their families and friends and the entire ecosystem. And I see a lot of while there is the negative aspect, I see a lot of positive aspects as well. That suddenly we have a lot of gratitude, we have a lot of empathy around. So I'm extremely happy and proud to share that I worked on a campaign. I wouldn't say a campaign actually. I would say we designed this whole framework where we said that I think it's very important for people to be aware of what they need to do, how they need to do. Second, I think we need to engage people. We need to take their minds off from the scare that has been created, more about their physical and mental well-being. I think we need to make sure that they learn, they upskill, they reskill during this time, because and at the same time we need to make sure that we're not drowning them in information, because there's a lot happening and people are really pushing a lot of information on. And at the end of the day, there has to be acknowledgement or praise for their efforts. So, keeping all this in mind, created a LEAP framework, which is called LEAP, and I do this most of the times, Anisu, so that it's easy for people to remember, for us to enforce, and it kind of creates a framework. So we said, okay, learn, engage, aware, praise. Let's take a leap. And as part of that, we designed an entire campaign where we started with the awareness part. And I said, so there were a lot of on-ground, online, messages created, which spoke about social distancing, which spoke about what you need to do, you don't need to do, and you need to make sure that you share with your family. And then you started talking about when the awareness went to a certain level and we were sure about it. We went to the next level where we said, okay, we start engaging, and we don't just engage people, our employees, but we engage beyond the workplace. So we talk to the families and we engage them. So there is a bonding, there is a trust, there is engagement there. And then we said, okay, now that the atmosphere is a little better, and obviously the business continuity planning is also streamlined, let's start into the learning aspect. So we skill upskill part of it. And at the same time, a lot of people went out of their way to make an effort. And you would be aware that there was a lot being said about newspapers, etc. So a lot of people went out of the way and actually spoke to their RWAs, to the people around, saying newspapers are safe. Which has also been said by WHO, and which has also been said by a lot of medical practitioners and celebrities and so forth. So they also went ahead and did it on their own. And see, for me, this is internal communication. When you are able to bring that level of trust in people, where they become your employee advocates, I think there needs to be praise or acknowledgement for their efforts, because this is proactive work. And so for me, this has been a great example. The journey is ongoing. However, at some point of time, I want to kind of step back and see the kind of impact that we've been able to generate because of this. Because end of the day, for anything that you do, I think it's important to measure, not just in terms of success, but the impact that you've been able to create.
Absolutely.
Does it answer your question?
Absolutely. That's a great insight. And I like the fact that you talked about employees as advocates. And I think that's a great thought. My question to you also is about your experience. During your experience, what has been your biggest challenge as a communicator?
Sorry, biggest?
biggest challenge as a communicator? What is the biggest challenge you face?
Well, you are an internal communication, you are a communication expert. So, it takes a lot to influence and convince people of this, of certain things that you want to do.
Right.
You know, because there are a lot of voices which are actually saying, no, I don't think engagement is important at this point of time. Or I don't think people really want to learn at this point of time because they are already struggling with a lot of things.
Right.
And your point is that we understand, but let's experiment.
Right.
If the first one doesn't yield results in
Yes.
terms of participation of numbers, and that's the first barometer,
Right.
and obviously the testimonials you get, we will stop it. But I think it's
Right.
extremely important. And I think as communication professionals,
Mm.
we are articulate enough to kind of influence other people and make our voices heard, because
Right.
end of the day, communication is about, you know, making the other person hear your voice. So there have been challenges. I will not say no, but slowly and steadily we've been able to overcome, and which is why we were able to roll out all these initiatives and interventions. I'll give you another example. When we were doing, when I was with HCL, and there was this whole thing of going to the campuses and talking about innovation, and that was also my portfolio.
Right.
I said, okay, let me go and present. And there were a lot of people, they say, but you've never presented to a campus.
Yes.
And I said, yeah, but I've presented internally, and I've spoken to press, and I've done that. It's all about you showing that level of, strength in me and confidence in that I can deliver. And they said, but there are 500 students which are going to be there at Lucknow University, etc., etc. Give me a chance.
Yeah.
And if not, I will not go to the next campus. I promise you that, and send a person to shadow me. And you will not believe, at that point of time, my manager was Subra Chakravarti, who's now, senior HR professional and based out of UK. He showed absolute trust. He said, no, not one campus. You will do all the campuses. And it was a flying success for us. So I think, every way you face challenges, I think it's all about convincing and influencing people,
Yeah.
and get your way.
Fantastic. Yeah, it's a great response. And to on the corollary of that, so what is the biggest opportunity you see for internal communicators?
Well, I think we are in an amazing position to influence and navigate conversations. And I think what we need to do as communication professionals is to give hope, because I strongly feel that hope is the only thing which is stronger than fear. And if you allow fear to delve in, and you might think this is philosophical, but I think hope is the only thing, and it's infinite. So if you allow hope to kind of seep into your system, and your
Right.
conversation and every communication is very conversational, is very to the point, and very transparent, I think you can overcome and you can influence a lot of people. So let me give you an example. When this whole COVID thing started, I think we were very clear, and it was a great opportunity for us. Even before the first case was announced, we were prepared because of our proactive behavior. And we had clearly listed down what needs to be done if anything happens. And that's
Right.
given so much hope and trust in the organization today that, we defined, we said, okay, this is happening, this is what the government is doing, this is what we are going to do. And X, Y, Z are the numbers that you need to contact immediately if you suspect anything, either for yourself or your family. And we did a lot of, regular checks in terms of who has traveled, who's not traveled, do we need. So I think as internal communication professionals, it was a great opportunity for us to kind of deep dive into the whole conversation, be part of BCP, and make sure that we create that impact, which ultimately is beneficial for the organization and the employees, so to say.
Got it.
And then, like I said, it's that honest, ongoing conversation which you have. I think which is important, not what they're thinking, but what the conversations we are navigating. So I think we were able to do that here.
Fantastic. And always they say that internal communication is not given a seat at the table. So what are some of the ways communicators can add more value to the business and be more trusted and respected?
I disagree with that, Anisu. I think we've come a long way from us purely creating posters to now having conversations at the table and actually designing and telling, um, informing the leadership, saying that this is what we need to do.
Okay.
So I'll give you another example. When we have the CEO town hall, and it is us who sit at the table and who say, okay, for this 45 minutes, session, and where everybody logs in. You have 6,000 plus employees and it's live streamed, etc. This is the conversation that we are going to have. Obviously, it's more of a conversation, a dialogue between the CEO and us. But what we talk about is, okay, what are the aspects of business that we are going to cover? There is also a need to acknowledge different functions within the organization, whether it's sales, whether it's editorial, whether it's research and market development, etc. So all the functions need to be represented. There is also a need to highlight the other cities, because mostly it's held in Delhi or Bombay. So there is a need to highlight the sales team members and have a live conference and have them acknowledged in front of every employee, saying that you achieved your target and this is what has been done. There is also a need, because we believe in a culture of innovation, there is a need and a want to have those innovators who've made a significant contribution to the enterprise to be given that platform. So these are the conversations that we've been having, and I'm happy to say that sometimes, yes, some things do not make it to the table, but most of the things make it to the table. And it's been a huge success in terms of not just the leadership believing, but it's also the employees believing in us and saying, oh yes, my efforts are being appreciated. You'll always have some bit of noise somewhere, where people will not be satisfied. And that's bound to be there. It's with us also. I mean, it's with me also. So I'm sometimes very, I come back home and I'm like, but this didn't happen well. And, then I have a conversation with my husband. And then I understand, because then I get a different perspective on it. So, but overall, I think we've been able to bring significant value as communication professionals. And therefore, the seat at the table is non-negotiable.
Fantastic. Good to hear that. I think that's quite reassuring for a lot of people out there that things are changing and getting better. What are a couple of key skills that internal communicators must have in their role?
Very good question. To each his own, frankly. I think agility, adaptability, to understand the scenario. What is that? You don't wait. Don't wait for someone to come and tell you this needs to be done. I think what you need to do is be agile enough to understand what your client wants, because end of the day, it's a client-customer relationship.
Exactly.
So understand what is it that your client is asking you for, or what is he or she expecting from you. And then put the larger organization in perspective and say, okay, so this is where these are the business objectives, and this is where you can connect the dots and deliver.
Got it.
So you need to define your existence basis that, and you need to showcase your capability. End of the day, bring that, the trust and the power of influence that you're thinking that you will have with the employees through internal communication is what you need to bring to the table with your internal stakeholders.
Got it. Okay, fantastic. Now, just switching gears, if suppose someone wants to start their career and they want to make a mark in employee communications, internal communications, what advice would you give them? What should they be thinking? How should they be behaving?
Anisu, like I said, it's a journey that each one has to discover on their own. So while I have been reaching out, I have been reading. I think it's very important to be aware of what are the best practices which are actually happening. Don't shirk away from the fact that you can learn from anyone. I think it's important to understand that learning is an ongoing journey. So don't bring your level, don't bring your thoughts in the fact that oh, I can't learn from this person. You can learn from anyone. You know, my daughter taught me the other day about something as simple as saying, you know, I was teaching her about Jhansi Ki Rani. She had to speak at school about a couple of months back. And I said, Beta, you have to say, I'm Rani Lakshmi Bai. And she repeated. And then after a minute, she said, but Mama, Jhansi Ki Rani could never speak in English, right? At that point of time. I said, absolutely right, Beta. Speak in Hindi. And, you know, it just struck me that with their innocence, but yet they're able to teach us that in that situation, you have to get into the situation to understand the situation. And I said, doesn't matter if the teacher doesn't give marks, but I'm going to say that my daughter was absolutely right. And also, so you need to learn, you need to put yourself in that situation, you need to empathize, you need to understand what the client wants. And it doesn't matter if you make mistakes. Mistakes means that you're working. But don't make the same mistake twice, because that means you're not learning. So that for me, I would say that it's a brilliant field. It's endless. There are great opportunities, but don't wait for opportunity to knock at your door. You create opportunities. You figure out what needs to be done. You figure out those opportunities and make the most of it.
Fantastic. And a related question to that, as a woman leader, there are a lot of women out there who want to make a mark in communications, and sometimes there are, challenges. They may need to take a break. They want to come back. So, what's your advice for women communicators? What can they do differently? What's your advice?
Anisu, you know, so I have a different take on that. I don't think it's a woman leader. I think it's a leader at the end of the day. And I think what is important is that you take your team along. You work together. You learn from each and every one around you. And there will be obstacles. I know I have colleagues, I have people in the ecosystem who do face challenges. For me, it's, there are a lot of times when I've been told that, oh, you were given this work because you're a woman. And I've turned around and said, I've been given this work. I'm going to execute it. I'm not going to see it as, because I'm a woman, I'm being given this work. It's my job and I'm doing it. It's your perspective. How do you see? For me, a lot of people say there are gender biases. Yes, there are issues when people, women want to come back and rejoin. But I have been particularly inspired by Indra Nooyi, and I see a lot of her videos. And, I think there is a fine balance that you need to do as a leader between your work and house, uh, professional and personal life. But what is more important is that you do not let anybody influence your mind and your thinking in a negative manner. I think every job is a job. You need to do it to your best ability. And that is what a leader should do. Along with it, ensure that you empathize and you're aware of what the shortcomings of the other people are. And make use of them as strengths. As simple as that.
Fantastic. Love the response. Very good response. In your experience and your thoughts, what is, if you were to look back on your journey as internal communicator, is there one thing you'd like to change and do differently?
None. I think what I am today is because of all those experiences. It wouldn't be fair on my part to say, oh, I was told to Xerox and therefore I know how to Xerox today. I was told to write something and rewrite something, and my ex-boss, he's with Dell now, and he used to be really harsh on me in terms of work. Great friend, even till date. It's been more than 18 years since I've known him, and he used to tell me, where have you copied this from? And I have no qualms about sharing this online with everyone. And I used to be really frightful of writing something. And I said, go, write it again. And then I used to come. And he's the one who told me, read as much as you can. Because that's the only way you will learn how to write. Because that is one skill nobody can take from you. Right. And today, I really bless him because today I write drafts, I do ghostwriting. for the leadership team. I write their scripts, etc. And it's purely because of that. This skill, nobody can take it away from you. So if you ask me as an internal communication person, you need to think from a design and implementation, because ideas, if not implemented, are zero.
Right.
They don't have any value. So, but your core competency is writing.
Absolutely. Fantastic. Yeah, that's a great point. And the last question is, what is the any trend? Can you tell me one trend that you spot in internal communication? I think that you think is going to change the way we work and operate.
Well, trend in internal communication, I think it's an evolving stage, and especially with the new normal that we're talking about,
right.
Which is remote working, technology being used, and we're transforming the workplace, workforce, and they're all transforming together,
right.
and the lines are diminishing. I think we will see a lot of different ways of engaging, communicating with the remote workforce. So it's evolving. I think we just have to wait and watch. But I think each of us, because of the industries that we are in, will have to carve our own path and our own journey.
Great. Great. That's fantastic. Thank you so much. These are fantastic responses. I'm sure our viewers will love this. Thank you again for taking the time to be on the show. And I'll let you know when this gets published.
Sure. Thank you so much, Anisu.
Let me stop the recording.